Stuart Hall theory of culture. Stuart Hall's theory of culture is one of the most influential perspectives in cultural studies, aiming to help people understand how culture shapes the world around them and the way they view it. According to Hall, culture is not just about art, music, or literature, as many people might think, but about the shared ideas, symbols, and meanings that influence everything we see, think, and do. For Hall, culture is deeply linked to power, identity, and communication. Hall believed that culture was a space where different social groups create, share, and struggle over meaning. Rather than culture being something fixed or set in stone, Hall emphasized that it is always changing, reflecting the complex world in which we live. This view, which Hall referred to as the cultural turn, shifted the focus away from more traditional views of society. He argued that culture was not simply a reflection of society, but an active force that could shape people's ideas, beliefs, and behaviors. A core part of Hall's theory is the idea that culture is tied to meaning-making. In everyday life, people are constantly creating meaning in everything they do, from the language they use, to the clothes they wear, to the way they interact with others. This process of meaning-making is central to understanding how culture works. For Hall, meaning is not something that exists in objects or symbols themselves, but is created when people interpret those objects or symbols. This interpretation, however, is not just random or personal. It is often shaped by society and the cultural norms and values that influence people from a young age. Hall believed that culture and power are closely connected. In any society, there are groups that hold power and have the ability to define what is normal or acceptable, shaping how people view the world. These dominant groups use culture to establish and maintain their influence, often reinforcing certain values or ways of thinking that serve their interests. For example, popular media, schools, and political systems often promote ideas that support the existing social order. Hall called this the dominant ideology and explained that it can create hegemony, a term that describes the way dominant groups use culture to maintain their power without necessarily using force. One of the ways that Hall illustrated this was through his theory of representation. Representation is how people, events, and ideas are portrayed in media and other cultural forms. According to Hall, representation is not a simple, objective process. It involves selecting, shaping, and interpreting reality. When we see something on television, read a book, or view a photograph, we are not seeing the truth, but a particular version of it shaped by many factors, including who created it and why. These representations play a powerful role in shaping how we understand the world. For instance, if certain groups are always portrayed negatively in the media, people may start to develop biased attitudes toward them, even if they do not have personal experience with them. Hall believed that while dominant groups often control representation, marginalized groups have the ability to create counter-narratives or alternative representations. These counter-narratives challenge the dominant views and offer new ways of seeing and understanding the world. For Hall, this resistance to dominant culture was an important aspect of cultural life. Through counter-narratives, people can push back against stereotypes and reshape cultural meaning. For example, the rise of independent media and social media platforms has allowed groups that were previously underrepresented to share their stories, challenging dominant perspectives and expanding our understanding of different cultures and identities. Identity is another major part of Hall's cultural theory. He argued that identity is not fixed or given at birth, but is shaped by cultural experiences. People form their identities based on their interactions with the world around them, including the media, their family, and their social environment. For Hall, identity is not something static but is always changing and evolving as people encounter new experiences and ideas. He described this as a fragmented or fluid identity, meaning that people can have different aspects of their identity that come to the forefront in different situations. For example, someone might identify with their ethnic background, their gender, their profession, and other aspects, depending on the context. This view of identity challenges traditional ideas that people have a single, unchanging core identity. One way Hall explained this dynamic view of identity was through the concept of encoding and decoding. Encoding refers to the way cultural messages, such as television shows or news articles, are created by producers who want to communicate certain ideas. Decoding is the process by which audiences interpret those messages. However, Hall emphasized that people do not passively absorb messages exactly as they are presented. They interpret them in ways that are shaped by their own background, beliefs, and experiences. This means that the same message can be understood in different ways by different people. For example, a news story might be seen as neutral by some but as biased or problematic by others, depending on their perspectives. Hall also introduced the idea of cultural codes in his work on cultural studies. Cultural codes are the underlying rules or systems of meaning that guide how people interpret symbols, language, and other forms of communication. These codes are often so ingrained that people are not even aware of them. For instance, in many cultures, the color white is associated with purity or innocence, while in others, it may represent mourning or loss. People learn these codes through their culture, and they influence how they interpret various aspects of life. Hall argued that cultural codes are powerful because they shape people's understanding of reality, often in ways they do not consciously recognize. Hall's theory of culture ultimately emphasizes the importance of understanding the role of culture in shaping society and individual lives. He saw culture not as a passive backdrop to social life but as an active force that influences people's thoughts, identities, and behaviors. Hall's ideas encourage people to question how cultural meanings are created and who benefits from certain representations or dominant ideologies. By examining these aspects of culture, Hall believed that individuals could become more aware of the ways that culture shapes them and could find ways to resist or challenge those forces, if they so chose. In today's world, Hall's ideas remain relevant as people navigate a complex cultural landscape shaped by media, technology, and global interconnectedness. His theory encourages a critical approach to culture, asking individuals to think about how meaning is made and to be aware of the power dynamics involved. In essence, Stuart Hall's theory of culture provides tools for understanding how people are influenced by their cultural environment and how they, in turn, can influence it through their actions, interpretations, and resistance to dominant ideas. If you enjoyed this breakdown of Stuart Hall's theory of culture, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content on fascinating ideas from sociology and philosophy.